It is the new year. We are officially on the clock in Iowa. And so we need to take a look at what we believe and what we don't in the polls with our friend Evan Scrimshaw. Welcome back to the program, Scrim.
Thanks for having me, man. I always like doing this.
So I will spare the indignity of the current standings of our failed candidate fantasy draft because I sent you this over Twitter. Asa Hutchinson got a humiliating bio written on him in Politico over the holiday season about his just disgustingly embarrassing failed campaign that should have probably ended 3 months ago. At least it would have made our league competitive. Instead, he continues to soldier on like some kind of haunted ring wraith in the battlefield of this election. How does that make you feel?
Sad. just sad. He's the Japanese soldier who doesn't realize the war is over.
It's over.
Yeah. Like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you still in this race?
Yeah.
All of the people you hired are like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. Like, buddy, you need to drop out. And he's like, nope. I'm still doing it.
It's hurting their careers that they're still walking around with them, right? Like this is just bad professionally by every element. Before we get into the Battleground polls, though, I just want to read something that came out today as we were recording this Tuesday. This was a USA Today Suffolk poll. President Joe Biden heads into the election year showing alarming weaknesses among stalwarts to the Democratic base, with Donald Trump leading among Hispanic voters and young people. Also, 1 in 5 black voters now say that they will support a third-party candidate in November. Biden's failure to consolidate support in key parts of his coalition that elected him in 2020 has left him narrowly trailing Trump, the likely Republican nominee, 39-37 in that poll. I'm going to combine that with a bio in Politico today, or a feature in Politico today with Charlemagne the God talking about his disillusionment with the Biden administration and Kamala Harris, and my own personal reporting on segments of the Drink Champs podcast, as long as we are talking about black media, where Nori and DJ EFN sound like they could be on the Daily Wire at times with how much they positively talk about Trump. Everybody that I respect in polling or politics on all sides of the aisle look at numbers like this that are positive for Trump with those demographics, but let's stay with the black community specifically. And they say they don't trust it because it hasn't been trustworthy in any other time that we have seen Republicans that have outsized support with the black community. Is there anything that you have seen with this that makes you believe any of this is different going forward, or is it still a wait and see?
It's still a wait and see because being disillusioned with a Democrat and actually pulling the lever for a Republican or for a third-party candidate when that would obviously help elect a Republican is a very different thing. And I think that a lot of people who are dismissing the polling are doing it for the wrong reason. Like, no, I don't doubt that the disillusionment's real. I don't doubt that the Biden campaign has issues to fix. I also think there's 11 months to the election, or 10 months to the election, realistically.
Yeah.
And there's time to fix it. This is what happens. Democrats have to engage with the community, and they will engage with the community because they're SOL if they don't, and everybody knows it. And there is a lot of reason to be skeptical, which is that every single time we have been posited a theory of Republican success that relies on, substantial improvement with black voters, it falls on their face.
Yes.
And I get that, and I do believe that on some level. I also think the Democrats who are sort of hand-waving away the issue on that basis are somewhat lying to themselves that this can just be fixed. I mean, it can be fixed, but it won't just be fixed by the passage of time. It will be fixed by sending Joe Biden out to talk about the black community's issues and to sort of meet them where their disappointment is. And also some decent, ad spending reminding the black community that Trump was not the, panacea of the black community that he is now trying to pretend that he is.
Yeah, I wonder if some of it is a little absence makes the heart grow fonder for a lot of different demographics. I remain very, very skeptical about those numbers with young people, with Hispanics, and with, I mean, and Trump has done better with Hispanics than he has with black voters, but he put a lot of effort. You know, it was 4 years ago around this time that his Super Bowl ad, his first Super Bowl ad, the first big spend of the 2020 campaign was him trumpeting the First Step Act. And that was specifically designed by that campaign to try to turn up black turnout. And guess what? He got the statistical average of a Republican's black turnout in that election, and he lost it. Now, let me just ask you specifically, let's understand, like you said, that any Democratic candidate is going to reengage these communities. They're going to make it a priority. Is Biden uniquely weak on any of this because of either the economy or his age? Things that he's probably not going to change between now and the election.
So, in theory, yes. Like, in theory, Biden's age is going to be an issue. And that would explain some of his weakness with young voters, and it would explain why he does relatively better with older voters, because 65-year-olds view people being like Joe Biden's too old very differently than 22-year-olds. The problem with that is that every time we've gotten polling of specific Democratic alternatives, right? Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, Gretchen Whitmer, whatever else, they don't do any better than Joe Biden. So if the argument is that Biden is somehow uniquely weak, and specifically uniquely weak with young voters and younger black and Hispanic voters, none of that sort of is borne out when you poll either quote unquote generic Democrat or these named alternatives. I also think at the end of the day, like, Donald Trump just hasn't been in the news very much recently, right? Like, it is sort of nostalgia, not really for Trump as much, but for 2018 when things just felt slightly easier, right? We were not on the backdrop of 4 straight, very chaotic years. Things just were, reasonably easier. The economy was not recovering from, a fairly massive shock.
Being turned off and turned back on again, like a cable router.
And then the ensuing damage.
Yeah.
And like, there's just like Trump hasn't been in the news for a while,
I mean, he is indicted 4 times. He's going to have 4 OJ trials this year before we get to the election. This is going, and it does. I mean, the element of this that does, if I were on the Democratic side, would make me concerned is that it's not only the fact that he heat melted the entire Republican primary since he got indicted 4 times. He's done better with independents, at least according to these polls right now. Now, that's coincided with the fact that inflation has remained persistent, and that is an issue that I don't think the Democrats can frame away, no matter how much they want to. But he's done better since those things happened, and there's going to be a lot more of those things going forward between here and now.
Yeah, but the other thing is that, like, something less than 50% of people genuinely believe it's going to be a Trump-Biden rematch.
Yeah.
Like, people do not really grasp that this is the race that we're going to get. And at some point, you have to explain to me why people who, voted for Joe Biden over Donald Trump in 2020, who voted for Raphael Warnock over Herschel Walker in 2022, or Mark Kelly over Blake Masters, or John Fetterman over Dr. Oz, are going to suddenly be like, actually, I could survive 7% inflation on Election Day 2022 because I don't want the guy who's supported by Donald Trump and who supports taking a woman's right to choose away from me. But I'm actually then going to vote for Donald Trump when I've had, likely 9 sustained months of relatively low inflation by Election Day.
Cooling inflation. The inflation's still there. It is still inflated, and that's the one thing that I think it's funny. I mentioned that Charlemagne the God piece in Politico, which I found interesting. But his thing was, it's not that he's frustrated because the Biden administration has been ineffective. He thinks that they have been reasonably effective. His problem is that they have not talked about things in the way that they should, which is largely what the White House is frustrated with him about, that he's talking about it in a way that they don't want him to. I don't know where but the economy is good actually messaging is going to get you, especially in some of these communities like Black and Hispanic and young people who have disproportionate lower income levels. And that's the people that inflation has hurt the most. Those are the people that are hurting the most right now. It's not the me's. It's the folks for whom $100, $200 grocery bill cuts into a lot more of that weekly, monthly budget. But
yeah, and they're gonna have to. I mean, one, like if there's another inflationary spike or more economic pressure in the latter half of the year, they might be in trouble. But hopefully they can get some sustained, like lower gas prices. Like it's not the be all end all, but it would be very good for the Biden campaign.
I mean, and it is really good. There was a piece that came out over the holidays that it was like the best kept secret in Washington D.C. is that the Biden administration has become the biggest gas producers in America in our history, and they can't talk about it because then it alienates the environmental side of their coalition. So they can't.
I think
they can't jump up and down and say.
I think at some point they just need to tell the environmental left, we've done everything for you. We're going to trumpet the thing as popular with our weak constituencies.
Yeah,
and basically they need to tell the part of the young left that's going to be mad at them for that. They're going to basically say like, get on board or get out. They're going to. Well,
it seems
they're going to have to on Israel Palestine, and they're going to have to on oil. They're going to have to, and they don't want to yet, but they have to.
I tend to think that this is going to be a shut up and eat it election for the progressive left. There's not going to be a lot for them. Now, whether or not they stay home is a different story, but I don't think that if you look at the ways in which, like you mentioned, the Biden White House does need to shore up these coalitions, it's not by moving to the left. It's not by trumpeting priorities on the left, unless that's abortion. That's it. Abortion in the morning, abortion in the evening, abortion at supper time. That's the number one thing that unites that party and has been electoral rocket fuel for them since 2020 when he got in, or since the Dobbs decision, really, I guess.
Yeah, but like there's no and even that's an issue that helps them with like old Mitt Romney voters. Like abortion is not even a quote unquote like left priority.
Yeah.
Sanders was famously hit in the 2020 primary for prioritizing left economics and sort of mocking Planned Parenthood and that sort of institutional sort of Democratic support. Like the Biden campaign needs to win. And as much as it's, I agree with many left progressive ideas. Like if I were a Democrat, an American Democrat, I would have voted for Sanders 2 times in the last 2 presidential primaries. The left needs to suck this one up. Trump is like, I'm sorry, man. Like it's not Trump. There's no progressive case for Trump at this point. We know what he is. Even putting aside the election denial stuff, he passed like the Bush tax. He passed a Bush era tax cut on steroids. There's no progressive case for him.
Well, let's take a look at what is more pressing. These are the Real Clear Politics average for Iowa, which, by the way, do you see that they redesigned their polling section?
Yeah, completely. What has happened?
Terrible.
I mean, I'm happy.
Terrible.
Because their old site was terrible, but
at least I knew it. It looked like Drudge Report era garbage, but at least I knew where to get everything. Now I got to learn how to get stuff, and it's copying the 538 design. Stop it. Real Clear Politics. Your site looks like trash. That's what I like about it. I'm very upset by this redesign. Let's go through the averages in Iowa of the candidates that are in contention. Christie 3.7, Ramaswamy 5.9, Haley 16.1, DeSantis 18.6, and of course Donald Trump 51.3%. I don't see a lot of serious people saying anything other than Donald Trump is going to win. The real interesting fight is for second place. I said on this show that the only person who seems to have a path, and it is a tenuous one, is Nikki Haley, and it involves her coming in second in Iowa, Ron DeSantis dropping out, Vivek dropping, and Christie dropping out, and then her winning in New Hampshire. When you look at these numbers, what stands out to you?
That the last time we had the last field date of any of the available polls was December 19th, and Nikki Haley has been the biggest spender on Iowa TV in the intervening 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
My actual hot take is that Nikki Haley is gonna come second, and it's not even going to be particularly close. She has all the momentum. She's been on TV way more than DeSantis. DeSantis doesn't really seem to know what they're doing. Their most recent ad that they threw up was the Casey DeSantis breast cancer survivor ad, which worked in the gubernatorial race last year in Florida, but also is not the kind of ad that you run 3 weeks before a caucus. That's a introduce you to my guy ad. That's not a close the deal ad. If you're having to do that, then you're trying to soft relaunch your candidate. We know his super PAC is bleeding money and has not been on the air nearly as much. Well, never.
Because it was such a tire fire they had to start another one because they disagreed with what they should be doing. That this has been a absolute for somebody that part of his electoral case was, I will be more detail oriented in a way that Trump wasn't. Trump's campaign has looked like a well-oiled machine, and his has made more headlines for staffing changes than they have for good polls.
Right, exactly. And the other thing is that the DeSantis campaign has yet to... We know that they have been polling Iowa basically nonstop for the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And unless they show me something in the next few days to dissuade me from this, I am writing an Iowa preview this week for the lines, and I'm going to tip Nikki Haley to come second in Iowa extremely confidently unless the DeSantis campaign shows me something in the next 2 or 3 days, and I don't think they can.
It is close now, and I would tend to agree with you. I believe that Nikki Haley is of that DeSantis coalition, despite the fact that, when you look at DeSantis' second choice voters, a lot of their second choices are Trump. So DeSantis fading is a positive case for Trump to continue to build his lead there. But for whatever Trump skeptical, if not never Trump voters that DeSantis has, I think Nikki Haley is going to be that choice in Iowa, and we're going to start talking about it more seriously as this is the one-on-one. It's for Nikki Haley. She's got to vanquish Ron in Iowa. Then she's either got to come damn close, if not John McCain upset Trump in New Hampshire, and then it's going to be all about the hometown fight in South Carolina. That's the only way that she stays viable. One more Iowa thought before we move on to New Hampshire and the likelihood of an upset there. I think we get, if I were to set the line at 1.5 campaign dropouts by the night of the caucus. So you also get the speeches after the results have come in. 1.5 from now until then. Do you take the over or the under?
Do we count Hutchinson? Because he's not really running a campaign anymore, but like in theory.
I mean, my instinct is to say no because he's not an actual factor, but also I have no beat on whether or not he's ever going to drop out. he might show up to the convention and keep trying to wrangle delegates. But sure, let's add Hutchinson in there.
So I would go over. Oh my god. No, I'm gonna go over because I don't think RDS goes to New Hampshire. So I think Vivek either before Iowa or at Iowa, and then I think RDS.
I have already in this podcast made my prediction. Vivek says he is doing a January 10th live podcast with Tim Pool instead of going to the debate. I am predicting that he brings out Trump at the end and he makes his endorsement right there. That would make
now
sense. It's time for him to return to the mothership. He wants to remain relevant. This is the biggest favor he can do to the campaign that he is no doubt going to be a mega surrogate for, and secure, the favor and loyalty of the person that treasures favor and loyalty over everything else. So that is my prediction there. My other prediction is that I think Christie drops out either from Iowa or in New Hampshire on the night of the Iowa caucus. He's also not going to make any of these debates. If his whole campaign has been running, that he's been running is stop Trump, stop Trump, stop Trump. Let's stop putting our ego and personal goals ahead of stopping this most dangerous candidate. He cannot continue through New Hampshire when there is now a plausible statistical case, which right now we would say Christie is polling at 10.5, DeSantis at 9.5, Haley is at 24.8, Trump is at 46.3, but it has been closer in the most recent St. Anselm poll, which has Haley at 30 and Trump at 44. If you add Christie's 12 total in that, we're at within the margin of error. I think the Christie vote would go to Nikki Haley. I don't think Christie can go forward with the campaign that he is running and put himself in the position to play a spoiler. And I think the clock is ticking on that.
So that requires you to have a higher opinion of Chris Christie than I do.
Oh, okay. Give it to me.
You're at 12% in the polls. Your entire strategy has been based on New Hampshire. Don't you have to go to New Hampshire? Okay, cool. You get 3% in Iowa, but you have known that you're going to get 3% in Iowa because your entire strategy has been built around the idea that you're going to get 3% in Iowa and then get to New Hampshire. I think he should, and if Chris Christie believes any of the things that he's talking about, then yes, of course he drops after Iowa, does it leaks it to take your pick of Beltway media the night before, does a joint appearance with Nikki Haley, gives the
ABC because he's going to want his job back,
a public speech. I just don't have any faith that Chris Christie actually believes any of the things that he says, but it makes sense. It's a logical choice. Yeah.
Well, you gotta. I mean, my argument for it is again, I very rarely. I don't ever appeal to politicians' better nature or their authenticity in what they are talking about. What I do take into account are who does Chris Christie surround himself with? Who is Chris Christie relying on? And if, let's say, what happens is what we think will happen, which is the DeSantis balloon pops, and it's now looking very much like, okay, Nikki Haley does better than you'd think, comes within 20% of Trump in Iowa, but DeSantis is a distant third, then right now New Hampshire is going to be ground zero. That's going to be the war zone. The question is whether or not DeSantis formally drops out or if he's got enough money in the tank to continue on to New Hampshire, but he becomes increasingly irrelevant. And it's at that point, it's the media executives that are going to hire Chris Christie. It's the Steve Cohens of the world for whom initially bankrolled him. And I think the only reason why Chris Christie is running for president is because the Mets season was a total disaster and Steve Cohen needed something to root for. those are the people that I think start looking at him and saying, hey, we all know you're better in the media. You can be the hero here, but you need to lay your sword down.
Yeah, that's fair. And because that's always the thing, is that you always have to remember that you need to make the case for why politicians going to do something, not on their merits, but on their self-interest. And that is a self-interested reason why Christie would do that.
Yeah. It was interesting. Sununu was on the Sunday shows, talking about this, and Sununu tends to go long-winded with stuff, but he seemed pretty confident. He's done campaign events with Christie, but he seemed pretty confident that Christie sees the writing on the wall. I don't know if he would talk like that unless he at least thought it was there was a realistic chance of happening. But obviously he has endorsed Nikki Haley, so that's what any Nikki Haley surrogate should say. So I don't know. Maybe I'm over-indexing on that, but I think both. I think Vivek before Iowa, and I think Christie right afterward, especially because right now the latest New Hampshire poll is also on the 19th. So that was also pre-holiday season. If we see, another beefy Nikki Haley poll right now, I mean, the next thing that she would want to have happen would be to climb within 10 points of Trump. If we see that happen in the next week, I mean, that's going to be it. That's going to be the story. The story is, can Nikki Haley, John McCain, Donald Trump?
I think she does. Am I crazy?
Does. Not could. Does.
I am working on finding a mechanism by which to put my dollars behind this, but I am predicting Nikki Haley is gonna win New Hampshire. I think the surge is going to work. I think she's going to get second in Iowa. I think there's going to be a ton of free media, and she's not Donald Trump, which means she is going to get way more favorable coverage than a politician who was unable to answer a very basic question about what caused the Civil War should get, because let's be honest here, CNN, MSNBC, The Times, and The Post would all love, and the Boston Globe, and all the Boston media, which are all into New Hampshire, they all really don't want Donald Trump to be the next nominee. And so they will give her a pass for these comments and not cover them on the other side of today, basically.
Yeah. Well, it also happened during the holiday season. My biggest fear about Nikki Haley is that she's had a few of these moments in the sun, and each time she says something stupid. Like, she had that moment in the sun after the debates, and then she talked about how there should be no anonymous accounts on the internet. and then she gets this. And look, I talked about it on the Patreon content, but what you saw with Nikki Haley was not an inability to answer what started the Civil War. It was her doing the Mac beach ball in her head of which side of the aisle or candidate sent this person to ask this asinine question that I cannot screw up. And then while thinking about it, she screwed it up. That was a classic example of her recognizing a trap and being so so focused on it that she answered it in a stupid way that moves things forward. And more than anything, didn't look confident doing it. She looked stammering and reactive to it. So it's not like that stuff doesn't happen at campaign events during this season. Almost every Q&A is going to have somebody that's going to ask you a trap question, but you got to know how to handle it at least confidently. And that was not something that we have seen. I don't know if Nikki Haley can operate in the forefront of momentum and not do something to make people second guess her right now, because she has not demonstrated that thus far.
The advantage is that she only has 8 days between a presumptive second in Iowa before New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And there's no real like set piece event in the calendar where she can screw that up between those two things.
I will say also,
and this is on stage with Trump. So
no. Unless that happens, who knows? Maybe Trump, there's going to be two debates in New Hampshire. So if it's down to a 1v1 and the debates are going to be canceled and the momentum is all on Haley's side, then all of a sudden maybe the calculus is different for Trump. Maybe he does show up and we do get a one-on-one debate between the two of them. Because I think Trump believes he would destroy her. And the only reason why he hasn't
elevate her in a way that I don't think the Trump campaign would want to do, because they just want to treat her like she's like an irrelevancy, and putting her on a debate stage 1v1 against 1v1 against him. That's really that's admitting that you're scared of her in a way that would be.
I mean, if we look, it's not crazy, especially if we see news of a dropout, whispers of a dropout, we've already seen the pre-mortems on the DeSantis campaign, that it's, anonymous quotes saying this is a hospice patient, that they are just making him comfortable. And so that's why you see ads with his wife on television, because at least he can go back and say, look, honey, we put you on TV. So there's that. If we see the Christie thing, I don't know. If there's a shock poll that has Nikki over Trump, I would wonder what would change the calculus, if anything. The one thing, though, that we can say about the Trump campaign throughout all of this, they've been insanely disciplined, and they have been brutal in focusing their attacks. Now, they were largely attacking Ron DeSantis. I think that there's ample evidence to say DeSantis could not repel those or other attacks. This was a campaign that was faultily designed and has only behaved accordingly since then. But they've been on message. They've been disciplined in a way that Trump campaigns have not in the past.
Yeah, I do just want to take my victory lap on the whole, DeSantis is going to be a terrible candidate.
You called it. You absolutely called it.
Yeah, it's the one thing I got right in that draft. And I really only took him in the third round as because I come from the Boston school of make your drafts, draft everything and then make interesting content. But
yes,
everything I said about his campaign was he is this cycle's Kamala Harris. There should be a lot better than they were, and I don't really get why they weren't.
I don't understand why he ran a better presidential campaign the summer before he was supposed to run a presidential campaign. I just don't get it. Don't understand it. I think that there's going to be a lot of finger pointing, a lot of blame in that orbit. There already has been, and it's spilled out into the media. That's your other comp for Kamala, is that the Kamala campaign was marked by how many of her own people were going into the media and destroying each other. And that's the exact same thing that's happened with DeSantis. He's got all these inner circle people that are knifing each other, not publicly yet, but, behind anonymous quotes and stuff like that. It's ugly. It's ugly. And now the question for DeSantis is, how do you work that reconciliation with Trump? Because that's the only move he has left.
I think if he the fact that he is staying into Iowa is a mistake, because he's not going to be able to he's not going to be able to go to Trump with any meaningful amount of support, or at least the theoretical support. He's going to be completely. I am confident Nikki Haley is coming in second, and I'm confident that he is going to therefore be embarrassed in Iowa. And I don't think he's going to be able to reconcile with Trump, and I think he has so thoroughly debased himself that I don't even think he's a 2028 contender anymore.
I don't know why anybody would believe in the promise of Ron DeSantis again. And that was the pitch for why he had a chance here. That's why he raised the GDP of a small country to run this campaign, one that I agree with you is highly likely to be a third place finish where they spent the most money. But I can't, from my perspective, say, well, the more people met you, the less electable you became. That was your first pitch. I'm more electable than Trump. You became less electable than Trump. You were supposed to be more detail-oriented. And while your policy positions are more detailed than Trump's, I believe him when he says he is going to do X, Y, and Z in a way that I don't really with Trump. Your campaign has been a total disaster, an absolute tire fire. So does the rubber meet the road with you? Right now, the answer is no. And unless there is some second act in like here's the thing with Trump. It's not crazy for him to reconcile with him. Ted Cruz reconciled with Donald Trump. That being said, he's going to need to have done something to put himself in a position where 2028 is serious. Because right now, I agree with you. I think that the Ron DeSantis, the Florida wave has, like many Florida waves, not gone as far up the beach as you would think.
Yeah, and I think Ted Cruz is like a good comparison, right? Which is that Cruz reconciled, but Cruz was the guy who came in second in 2016, and I don't think anybody serious thinks that he has any presidential future. And I kind of think that's what DeSantis is going to be, except for the fact that DeSantis is term limited in 2 years and does not have a plausible path to a Senate seat, because I don't think either Rick Scott or Marco Rubio is retiring from the Senate anytime soon.
Yeah, I could.
The real problem for DeSantis.
I mean, you could set up a primary challenge to Rick Scott, but you know that would require a lot more. I don't know. Now we're way down the road on DeSantis' future. So all right, right now you think that, and polling will back this up, that it is 1, 2, 3 Trump, Haley, and DeSantis in Iowa, and you would like to find a market in which we'll take your money, saying that Nikki Haley is John McCain in 2000 and pulls off the big upset in New Hampshire.
Yes, those are my two fairly confident predictions about the GOP primary right now.
Here's the one thing about being on the ground in New Hampshire is when there is momentum, it just feels intense. Like Amy Klobuchar only survived in Iowa because the Democratic Party there screwed up so bad that nobody had results. So an embarrassing finish for her. She was able to get out of town without it being the story. And then she found herself with momentum in New Hampshire. And when you play these small, tiny rooms and these like churches, and you've got a little momentum behind you, like she did in that moment, it feels like crazy. It feels wild. I very much can see Nikki Haley filling that role if she comes in second, and now Christie drops out. That is something that I think it will feel like Haley mania is happening on the ground there in a way that I think could facilitate a big upset. But then again, you know, Trump hasn't trained his entire firepower on her. He's still pretty much, if you look at his emails, it's 60% DeSantis. So we'll see.
I just don't know
all
that
right.
the onslaught's going to come until she actually definitively proves herself.
Yeah.
Like she comes second in Iowa on the Monday. We got the polls Wednesday, Thursday, Friday showing her continuing to surge. Can the Trump apparatus like really turn around an effective enough attack in 3 days, or do they just basically punt New Hampshire and then just, you know, get all the anti-Haley ads ready for South Carolina and say we're going to fight you in we're not going to fight you on the beaches. We're going to fight you in Charleston. We're going to fight you in the Low Country, and we will never surrender. And knock her out there.
I'll tell you what. Here's the real winner. The fact that this primary is interesting, which it has not been for the last year.
Gives me something less to write about it, which I'm happy about.
Yes! We're so back, Scrim! We're so back! Where can people read more of your work?
Political betting, NFL content, and hopefully soon NHL content over at thelines.com. Political writing, mostly Canada, but it'll soon be America as well, over at scrimshawunscripted.substack.com. Follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. My YouTube channel, I'm actually going to be doing the Scrimshaw Show relatively often. I will have you on at some point if you're willing to do it.
I would love to. Yeah, absolutely.
I released a 2-hour-long draft with a buddy of mine on every toss-up House race, Senate race, and presidential state for 2024. We're going to be doing that for the first of every fiscal quarter this year, just as a sort of way to talk about a wide variety of things and have a sort of running running trail of where we think the environment is, so we can laugh at ourselves when everything is wildly different.
When everything goes
6 months.
Exactly.
But yeah, follow me on Twitter at eScrimshaw. It will give you everything that you need to do. NFL playoffs are here, so that'll be my priority for, week 18 and then the playoffs, but got the politics writing coming back. Have an Iowa preview out this week, New Hampshire out next week.
Who do you like in the playoffs?
Niners are going to not definitely, but the Niners are going to win the NFC. If the Bills make it, I bet the Bills to win the AFC at this point.
Really?
I think over
the Ravens,
the only team that has the ability to go punch for punch with Baltimore at this point.
Their offense looks like trash.
Yeah, but Josh Allen has at least a theoretical ability to be the best player on the field. I don't think this version of Mahomes with his supporting cast can do it. The other one would be Cleveland, but I just fundamentally don't think Joe Flacco is going to have that moment. It would be great if he did, but I just don't think Flacco goes into Baltimore and beats his old team. That's just some Disney nonsense. That's not going to actually happen.
Also don't think. I think their defense is overrated. I don't
a little bit.
I don't think that it's. I think that because they've played trash teams and the Joe Flacco story is interesting and people are desperate to talk about the Cleveland Browns because they just desperately did not want to talk about Deshaun Watson, that it's gotten a lot of the defense, but it's some of these and I know by comparison because I root for the Steelers and we've played all these same teams and there's been they got torn apart by the Rams. They give up big plays in a way that the way that their defense is talked about, which is the 2000 Ravens, just shouldn't, in my opinion. But what do I know? I'm not a sports prognosticator. I'm a politics man. Scrimshaw, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.